No more fussing. The good times are over. The dark times have begun. Now it's time to record the podcast. Hello, everybody. To everybody who's listening, welcome to this podcast that I am now recording. It's taken a few months, but you know what? Better late than never is what I always like to say. So for this podcast, I've got a couple of guests, a couple of friends of mine who will be joining me in talking about some video game music. First of all, to my linear left to right order from where I'm looking, just so you know that there's no favoritism, we've got Uncle Willie, otherwise known as Will. Will, introduce yourself to the good people.
Hello, brother. Hello, everybody. I have a cold. My name's Uncle Willie. Thanks for having me.
I too have a cold, so that makes us a good fit. Will has composed music for my videos, so if you've listened to any of the Ultima videos, you've undoubtedly heard his stuff, or if you've watched them, I guess, not just listened.
Sorry about that.
Shut up. Will does a great job, and he's a fine musician. He's played in a variety of bands that are excellent, and he knows what he's talking about. But Will is not as much of a gamer as Dave over here.
No, I'm
Dave?
not.
Hello, I am Dave. Do you want me to say more?
No, I'm Dave is fine. I think you pretty much covered it there.
Yeah, that's about what you need to know.
Excellent. Dave, also very talented musician, knows his stuff. I think, as somebody who doesn't know their stuff, I'm kind of spitballing on that being the case, but I think he knows his stuff.
I know
He
one
knows
or
his
two.
stuff.
I know one or two stuff, but I wouldn't say I know.
Between the both of you, we collectively know like 7 or 8 stuff, so that should be enough to
Yeah.
fill a podcast time slot, I think.
Quick, interesting anecdote. I believe I hired Dave for a much lower fee than he probably should have charged to perform at one of my band's shows way back in the day when we did a CD release party.
That's right. I think you probably played me more than appropriately, considering the amount of notes I missed. It's
No.
hard. It's hard to keep up with.
there's a
Will's
lot of-
composition.
I think you nailed it, Dave.
There's a lot of humility in this room. It's a very humble podcast. We're very humble people.
Humble podcast.
I picked these two people because, when I think of the musicians that I know, you guys always come up in my head as like the first amongst the most talented. And also, I think that
Oh, stop. Go on.
you guys are handsome, you're cool, you got a real sense of style. And I think there'll be a good kind of balance because, Will being, you're a gamer, but I would say more of like kind of like a casual gamer. Like you play a lot of games, but like you're not interested that much in like the mechanics of a game. Would it be fair to say?
I would say that's the polite way of saying that. I know very little about gaming, especially compared to you two.
That's fair.
Very, very little. And yet I respect the hell out of the craft and the artistry and all the various components.
Well, and that's partially why I brought you on as well, because I know I always send you video game tracks and I'm like, Will, this is so cool. You have to listen to this. And you always actually earnestly do. You've never like written it off as like, a hobby for babies or anything like that. So I appreciate that. And then Dave, you are much more of a gamer. I would say if I wanted to talk to anybody personally that I know, like in real life about game design, you would probably be the person who I would not have to pull any punches with because you know a lot about games and how they work.
Well, that's a honor. Yeah, I love game design. I think it's like I love playing video games. They're fun, but kind of parallel to that, I just love game design as a craft and just the depth of thought that goes into creating these experiences that we enjoy and love. And
that's I think partially perhaps because like you also come from like a background of like visual art as well, which I think you're probably just like a broadly like artistically like maybe curious person, like you just like learning about art of all types, right?
I like to learn things. I like to know things. I know a little bit about a number of different things. And that gives me, maybe a perspective to speak across disciplines in that way.
Master of all trades, jack of none.
Turns out being the jack is the more important part. But
All right, so all that said, these tracks were submitted by people on my Patreon, the Persons of Lordly Caliber tier. And by these tracks, I mean the video game tracks that we're going to be listening to today and talking about today. I'm not sure how many of them we're going to get through, but we're going to try our best. These things tend to, in my experience, take more time than you anticipate when you're cooking up the idea.
mm-hmm.
So if we end up spending 25 minutes talking about one track, instead of balancing that by talking about another for 15 seconds and moving on, we'll probably, hopefully we'll be able to regroup maybe if it doesn't all get done today. That said, I guess we'll move on to our first track in no particular order. And some tracks inevitably are going to have there's more to say about them than others.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'd start with some high energy metal track here, because a lot of people sent in high energy metal tracks.
They sure did.
So the track, yeah, you guys have really particular tastes, but it's good. There's some cool stuff in there. The track we're going to be looking at right now is Guilty Gear X2, Keep the Flag Flying. Right on there. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Video Game Music Podcast, the only station that really rocks. It's a pretty wicked riff.
This song is rad.
Yeah, this was one of the coolest songs. I figured I'd start the podcast out with this one because it's a pretty wicked, like, high energy.
How did they get John Petrucci to play in their track?
I'll throw that on a loop here. Should just loop there. Yeah. So this track is, like I said, it's from a game called Guilty Gear.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fighting game, like a fighting game player's fighting game.
Right.
Very like technical, very, very anime styled.
Mm-hmm.
I've never played it personally. I'm terrible at fighting games. But this is like, it's one of those fighting games where if you're not committed to learning how it's played, you're going to be frustrated and hate it.
Right.
I think. Oh, it's Japanese, all right. In fact, this song is composed by Daisuke Ishiwari. Nobody get mad. I think I pronounced that pretty well. I've been practicing.
Full point.
I love those little like ride bell hits in that break.
Oh,
It's very nice.
totally. I wanted to pick you guys' brains regarding one of the, like, this riff here. No, not this riff. Might just need to restart the song from the beginning. We're almost at the end anyway, so I'm just going to restart it here if that's all right with you guys.
I could listen to it all afternoon.
Oh, and you're gonna. You're gonna. This is your neoclassical metal fix that you've been waiting
Yeah,
for.
this is very Castlevania.
This intro totally made me think of like the old school like Symphony of the Night, and even a little bit of the metal aspect
Yeah,
of it too.
for sure.
Really?
Yeah, that Castlevania game, that was the first one where they had CD technology, so they packed in a lot of like more real instruments rather than trying to like just create a synthesized symphony with a Super Nintendo sound chip. Okay. Yeah, so this riff here, there's something being done here it's like a scale, but they're like skipping over notes.
I think you're probably Can you play that riff again?
Yeah.
Time to nerd out, folks.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
It is actually a very interesting part.
Can you pause it?
Yeah.
Pretty much. I think it hits this note.
Does it hit that note?
No.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
I guess because like if the root is chugging there, what key are we in? Sorry, D. So if the root is D and it's chugging, but the guitar implies the sixth
so it's like
interval
an
on
augmented.
there. That's what's kind of cool about it, right?
Yeah.
Because it kind of... Dave, you explain that in theory.
Your problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, hitting that, we're in D minor, so your, main, it's your D minor triad, but we're hitting this instead of that, A at the top there, you're hitting this note, which is giving it kind of this augmented feel, and
it feels like, I know this is actually a technical term, so I want to clarify that I mean this in like a spiritual sense. It feels like what should be sort of a triumphant and cool sort of riff it almost feels kind of left unresolved. Like there's an uncertainty that's created through the note choice there. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I was expecting like something a bit more outside of the scale there, just from the way it sounds. But I think when you're making that big interval leap to a note that's just even a little bit unexpected, right? Like you kind of want to hear, to that A.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what I mean. What I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And then it kind of resolves to that A in the next phrase, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, music. A lot of music is essentially based around creating tension and waiting for that resolution, right? And so you're hitting a note really strong, really prominently there. That's creating that tension because it's not quite what you expect over that, D minor chord there.
Yeah.
I guess you can also look at it like a second inversion chord of a major chord. So, for example, if this is the chord, it's major. But if you take the second note of that major chord, that's kind of the implication.
Oh.
Na, 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 na. Huh. So there's different dimensions to look at it. The other thing is there might be a passing tone after that unexpected note. It might go down to the flat 5 there, although it's kind of hard to pick up on because it's kind of just juicy, loosey guitar licks.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. And that might add another, you just call that a passing tone, a note that's otherwise not in the scale that you're working with. And then it moves up to obviously Dave can take it from there, but there's some kind of modal interchange thing going on. Once it moves to the F and then all of a sudden the unexpected E flat.
No, you're going to have to take it from there. You've already lost me.
Don't worry, guys. I got this. As the one here who knows nothing about the thing.
From the D minor, it moves to a relative major.
Okay.
So that's all within, bounds of the conventional scale. But then that last one, oops, it's like, oh, now I'm singing. That's a huge problem.
No, that's not a problem. That's a solution.
That's modal interchange. That's unexpected and outside of your conventional scale that you're working with, which is surprising to the ear, and yet it works quite well.
Okay.
Can you explain modal interchange more? Like, could you play that progression without the modal interchange?
That's a great question.
We still love you if you can't.
Yeah, like definitely edit
think you
that
could.
out if-
Oh yeah, that's fair enough. I definitely could edit it out.
I think modal interchange is essentially
like you're basically borrowing harmony from another mode, right? Like so where you would expect
I should have boned up on my theory.
Well, it's fine.
so that's like Metroid, right? What is
Oh wait, do that again. Oh yeah, like the Brinstar. Yeah.
So you got
Oh, nice. Yeah.
so you got essentially a B major. Wow. I played this in a weird key that I'm finding it difficult to grok right now because I'm
You
not.
dug your own grave.
Yeah,
now
I dug-
lie in it,
okay.
Dave.
So we got B major, and then if we are playing a B major scale, and we're playing those notes, we are not expecting this C sharp here as part of B major, right? So we're going up instead of going up a major, we would expect if this was all in B major B. But
Yeah. It makes it sound more
Yeah.
triumphant and like hopeful.
Yeah,
in a
this
way.
this chord doesn't belong in B major. So we're borrowing from B minor essentially.
Okay.
Right?
In this, yeah, I think there's different. There's so many. It's multi-dimensional, so I just get lost down the rabbit trail when I would have to go back to my theory roots. But I think the key to modal interchange, in that instance, I think you're shifting down a whole step from that. So you're moving down a whole step, but it maintains the tonal center. The root note, the root feeling, if that makes sense. So you do move down a whole step, but it's still the tonal center, I guess, centered around the melody is still there. But that would require me to to really think about it and unpack it.
So yeah, basically what you're saying is this basically allows you to kind of like shift the kind of the mood of the song in a way that does not shift the entire song's mood. Like it sort of briefly swings into other territory while still being anchored in the original like key and everything.
Yeah, I mean it's I always just find it really interesting when it's done, right? Your ear's not always used to hearing things because it's you're in a key and then you're kind of breaking the rules of that key. You're borrowing from something else and it catches your ear. So one game composer that like basically every song he writes is pretty heavily dependent on this is Grant Kirkhope. If you've listened to like the Banjo-Kazooie or the
N64 legend status.
N64
yeah.
Grant Kirkhope stuff. Yeah, I don't even like he never sticks to like one key. He's always grabbing chords from other keys and throwing them in there and the result when you're doing it that much.
Could I bring up a Grant Kirkhope
Go
song
for it.
here on YouTube to maybe
maybe Grunty's Lair is a good example
So
of that.
Sure.
another way of saying it is he doesn't stick within the diatonic framework of conventional music. Diatonic meaning what? The 8 or the sort of the 7 notes of any given scale.
Yeah, so a
Step
scale
outside of that.
Yeah, so a scale is defined by the intervals between the notes. So if I'm playing a major scale, I've got a whole step, a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And that's the pattern. Every major scale is going to have that pattern of intervals between its steps. A minor scale is going to have a different pattern. When I'm moving a triad up, I'm just playing all the notes in that scale, which means, if I'm in C major, my C triad is going to be major, my D triad is going to be minor, E is going to be minor, F's going to be major, G's major, A's minor, B is diminished, and C is major again. So if I'm playing a C major and then I move up to an E triad, if I'm playing diatonically, it's going to be E minor, but I might, for the purpose of the song, want to raise that third scale tone and make my E major. So that would be the mode mixture, whatever we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well
Interesting.
put.
Well,
Nerd note, baby.
I didn't think we'd be going from Guilty Gear to Grunty's Lair from Banjo-Kazooie, but today there's all sorts of surprises. The Teddy Bear's Picnic motif.
Pretty much. So yeah, this chord already is not what you would be expecting.
True.
There's another one.
It is so... Of all the video game composers in the world, Grant Kirkhope's fingerprint is so, like, the most
so
identifiable, baby.
Yeah.
You just know his stuff when you hear it. He also composed for GoldenEye and Perfect Dark as well. All the
Yeah,
rare
so
stuff.
Kirkhope's using a lot of this mode mixture to have these funny, like, these odd chromatic, melodies, where, yeah, the overall effect of it is just goofy, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, that's obviously not the only way to use this. But
Right. You can also use it to make it cool.
Yeah. Back to Guilty Gear.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, as a non-fighting game player who doesn't understand this game, I don't know anything about it. I know I looked up a little, just the context of this song.
Yeah.
And I could just tell there's like, this especially being like a very like anime-centric game, which anime tends to produce stories that are much more like dramatic and
Right.
like epic. There's a sort of like duality in the song that I have noticed, where there's like these sort of more formal, aristocratic, classical sounding pieces in the music, which is like directly contrasts with the kind of wild, chaotic metal that kicks in in the beginning and everything. So that said,
I take it, Kirk.
yeah, totally. A Kirk Hammett solo, a pre-Black Album Kirk Hammett. So what I think is interesting about video game music in this kind of context is how it can actually tell you something about the characters and the people that are involved in the conflict that is ongoing, not even knowing anything about the lore of Guilty Gear or the story. I feel like I know something about the conflict that's happening here, not just in terms of how like the gravity behind it, but also like the types of peoples that are involved in it, which is something specifically fighting games I think are really good for. Is like the entire purpose of a fighting game is you're taking two representations of things and like pitting them against each other. So the conflict in most games is more kind of like layered under gameplay systems, but when it comes to fighting games, like say even like Street Fighter, like the characters represent, just in their designs alone, not only like the countries that they're from, but like you'll have like a big hulking goblin man in Blanca, and like there's physical characteristics and and where they're from and everything that tells you something about the characters. And you just basically are pitting like these two concepts against each other. And in that way, it's like it's not as clear in a fighting game when it's like, oh, it's good that this guy died and it's good that the good guy won, because it's not as much about good guys and bad guys. It's just about like, it's about like ideologies colliding and like differences, like diametric oppositions coming together and like physically duking it out. Which, to tie it back to this track again, makes a track like this it makes it good for that, not only in the fact that it stands for multiple different things, but the fact that it is like, it's just a badass piece of music that makes you amped up to want to like kick someone's teeth in, right?
Is this like a character's theme, or like do you know what the context of this
I think I have
piece
that
is in the game?
I think I have that written down. So my understanding is that this is a theme that only plays in-game when two specific characters are battling.
That's super cool.
So it's not one character's theme, it's like a context-sensitive piece of music.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you think that the sort of mix of the sort of almost Baroque classical kind of stuff and the metal, like, is that?
I think it's intentional. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm basing it on character designs as well.
Yeah.
But I believe there is some like sort of primeval versus more civilized aspect to the fight.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very cool track. Very cool track.
Yeah, it's like sometimes the Baroquean part stands on its own. Then the metal kicks in and completely takes over, and then at other times they're competing for supremacy or they're combining. That's a cool observation.
The metal is louder, but it's not clear what force is dominating the song, which is cool.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even in a part like we're listening to right here, like at times, it's the metal instrumentation, but it is more grounded in kind of classical harmony and progressions, and other times it's much more influenced, stylistically by sort of the metal.
Motorhead.
Yeah. Oh, hey, don't you worry. We got Motorhead coming today. Although, given how long it's taken to get through this track, I don't have high hopes that we're going to be able to make it there in time.
Actually, that's a good point, though, Dave. That part is totally grounded. That is neoclassical.
Yeah.
That progression's classic.
And I think, you kind of touched on this briefly, but in the context of a fighting game, you have these characters. A fighting game compared to a JRPG. JRPG, you're gonna have 70 hours to develop these characters. In a fighting game, you get like a sentence or two they quip before they start.
10-second cutscene.
Beating on each other.
Yeah.
And so, whatever means you have to reinforce who these characters are, visual design, music, those things kind of become very, very important, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And that is one of the things I try to hammer home in my videos. I think a lot of people who make videos about video games, let's say in the same sort of space that I do, they don't really like to talk about music that much because they feel perhaps that they're like not qualified to talk about music, which, well, first of all, I'm not qualified if you want to look at it like in a technical way.
Yeah.
But more than that, I don't really think that qualifications are necessary to talk about music, especially in the context of a video game, because it's such a multi-dimensional thing, and like how a track makes you feel in a game or how it affects the scene, like the.
For sure, yeah.
I remember you mentioning we talked about Final Fantasy VII, and you said something to the tune of like, it's amazing how much the music carries the like intensity of a lot of the
emotional weight. Like if you played that game on mute, like you would not be able to read scenes properly, I think. Like,
I totally agree with that. And I think it just, that kind of sort of underscores how important music is, even when it feels like maybe it's not that big a deal. So
we forgot to establish our credentials before we started. What are each of our credentials? I have half a degree in jazz studies. Thank you very much.
It's better than nothing.
I technically have a full Bachelor of Arts in music that
I've
done nothing with in the last 10 years.
Just kidding about the credentials. Credentialism, we all know, is it's for the birds.
This is literally like the fight between these two guys. We've got aristocratic degree-holding Dave, and then primal, furious Will, who abandoned his
guy who actually does stuff.
Humble fight.
What genre do you pick to represent you in our battle, Will?
Europop.
All right, not expected. Rocksteady.
Yeah, I'm picking 1 hour generative ambient modular synth.
This is the most boring fighting game ever. You guys aren't even fighting. You're just kind of standing around.
Floating around in ethereal space.
That's right. Yeah. That said, I think we will move on to another fighting game, actually. And this is, I think, one of the coolest tracks, actually, that is on the list, period. And that is the song Warlord from the game Killer Instinct. I should say the Killer Instinct remake, because Killer Instinct was actually a Super Nintendo fighting game from the 90s, and it got a remake in 2013, I think. It was supposed to be like an Xbox One launch title, and I think the game had a pretty rocky start when it was first launched. A lot of people didn't really care for it, but it had a lot of improvements given, and now I think it's actually like a fairly well-respected fighting game.
Yeah.
So,
Have you guys played it?
I've only played the original. I've never played the remake.
I get Killer Instinct confused with, is it Altered Beast?
They couldn't be more different.
I know, they're just the same. I haven't played. I've played Altered Beast.
Like Rise from Your Grave, Altered Beast.
Like the one where is that the one where you kind of transform into?
Yeah, the crappy Genesis. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the great Genesis game where you.
Yeah, I've not played Killer Instinct. I've played Altered Beast for maybe 5 minutes. The titles get confused in my brain. So,
well, actually, to set the stage for Killer Instinct, then I have to play. There is a song from the original Killer Instinct that it was made by Rare, by the way.
Okay.
So
scored by Grant Kirkhope.
Believe it or not, no.
Sorry, go ahead.
You being represented by Eurobeat makes it important that I play this song. This is from the original Killer Instinct. I don't know if it's in game or if it was like some sort of associated media, because I don't think they could fit this song onto a Super Nintendo cartridge. But this was on the Killer Instinct soundtrack CD that came out in the 90s, I think. This is not the song we're listening to, by the way, but this is just like an establishing shot. This is what Killer Instinct was.
This is so intense.
Just you wait.
It's the way you move.
Oh, dang.
To the killer groove.
Full Euro vision.
Yo, jump around, yo. Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can just picture some like Eastern European. That's great. All right. That said, now that I've set this next song up, which by the way is nothing
That could not
like
be
that.
more different than what we are about to listen to.
I did not expect it to go that direction at all. I'm like, ooh, this is really cool. This is like analog synths. All of a sudden, bap, 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 bap. That fill. That was the fill.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so this is Warlord, which is the theme of a character named Spinal from the original game,
Okay.
who I thought was cool when I was a kid because he's a skeleton. He's actually sort of the comic relief character,
Oh.
which you wouldn't expect by listening to this song, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that shortly. I'll just let it play here for a little bit.
Get in, boys. We're going to war.
That's right, hop in the longboat.
Heading over to England.
Time to show those Franks who's boss. That's so awesome.
That's great, yeah. If it's a skeleton character, you gotta have like the bone marimba in there. Like,
Well, and that's the thing. See, I've heard like skeleton music is always a silly xylophone.
yeah,
They found a way to make that cool, which to me is wizardry.
that's
Literally playing on the bones of their charred enemies.
Okay, so this song was composed by Mick Gordon, who is
Okay,
a
that makes-
very, very
yeah.
prolific modern video game composer. He's
Yeah.
done all the Doom games, like the new Doom games, and he did Prey as well, which I know you've played well.
I played the new Doom just for the music. I couldn't
Yeah?
really hack it, but I enjoyed the soundtrack.
Pretty great soundtrack, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's a very sought-after composer, but I know for a fact, it's funny you said playing on the bones of your enemies. One of the instruments used in this song, I actually have it written down what it is called here. The flute in this track is called a kangling, which is a traditional Tibetan instrument made out of a human femur.
Oh wow.
So you weren't even You weren't even far off. Whoever
Wow.
said that. One of
Wow.
you guys mentioned that.
And Mick Gordon has one.
And Mick Gordon has one. I know he is both loved for the music he creates and hated by the businesses he works for because he does not compromise when it comes to creating music.
Yeah.
It's led to, I think, some pretty big disputes with id Software.
Yeah.
But he takes his time and makes sure that it's done in like a really particular way. I think he's very, very fussy about that type of thing.
Yeah.
But in a like kind of eclectic, artistic, zany way.
Yeah.
I find the symphonic component of this song interesting because it's almost out of place, eh? But it's like this track is like a combination of like Sepultura, like tribal South American metal,
Yeah.
meets like Rammstein from Germany, but it's plainly Scandinavian. But then has this, it's played on the bones of the dead, but then it has this symphonic element too. It's kind of pretty cool in that
Yeah.
respect.
Totally.
Yeah, Gordon's a really interesting producer that way, and that he, like, just a lot of, like, he's just a sound designer, right? Like,
Yes.
kind of almost first and foremost from what I've seen of him. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't recognize him as the composer of this track initially.
It kind of clicks once you know, right?
Yeah, those huge, like, pitch bends down in that low register.
The dynamic range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Those half step key changes downwards or whatever.
Yeah, like that's the beginning of the song. That's just super. You don't know what's coming. That like the first time I listened to this, that just smacks you across the face.
Totally.
Because it's the last thing you expect is just a one semitone drop down, and that's the whole harmony of the song, right? It's just over E natural and E flat. Like there's no other harmonic progression in the whole song.
Yeah. Totally. It is very simple and like brutal in a way. What I find interesting about this song as well, like I mentioned, Spinal in the original Killer Instinct was sort of like a goofy character. He was just a skeleton. He's a pirate skeleton, which makes him even funnier.
Classic.
So, in the remake, I have it written down here. Spinal was an ancient Babylonian who was cursed and turned into a living puppet. And while he was trapped inside of his own mind, he gradually went mad.
As one does.
His puppeteer forced him to burn himself alive with only his skeleton remaining.
Okay.
But with the curse broken, somehow his consciousness continued to inhabit his skeleton. So again, I want to stress he was a funny pirate skeleton in the first game, and he's now become this crazy, creepy, multi-dimensional madman, ancient Babylonian warlord skeleton.
There's something that's so funny to me about like mentioning the Babylonian Empire. Like this is just so goofy, but then it's like let's make sure it's grounded in like
Totally.
our real history, right? Like,
Yeah, like anyone would have asked.
Yeah, like you expect kind of like, oh, he was a king in a dark empire from the
Right.
past, right? But no, it's the Babylonians.
No, it's specifically
Yeah.
the Babylonians. And weirdly, despite the fact that he's tied with Babylon, I looked it up. The chanting that goes on in the song, like the tribal chanting,
Yeah.
it's actually I think Swedish is the language.
Okay.
And the lyrics, I won't attempt to read the Swedish, but it's something like here, I'll go over the chanting for
Darling, I
myself.
love you.
Yeah.
Stay with me.
Exactly.
in
Oh, you
life.
can also hear Spinal doing an evil cackle in the background periodically. Have you guys have noticed that? Here, let me back it up a bit. You'll hear it close to the beginning of the intense part here. But you can hear Spinal laughing. That's him.
Oh yeah.
That little cackle there, that's him laughing. Which is also something that is so silly in principle, but they
Yeah.
managed to like make it cool in the song. And to me, that's like magic. But the lyrics of the song are: the darkness falls over our land, the wind sings, the earth trembles, the enemy is at our gates, ready to subjugate us now. Warriors gather at the holy grave, calling for Spinal, the warrior god. Give us the help we need in this battle. Save us, mighty god.
Spinal could not turn the tide of the Persian onslaught.
Well, it's not a fair fight. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
it's-
walking bones.
Yeah, against an entire empire. But anyways,
The fact that he is he's graduated to like being a warrior god, that like Vikings are calling for his help in battle. It just makes it all the cooler. And so he's like Babylonian pirate, and then there's like Swedish lyrics that's supposed to be like Scandinavian battle chanting.
Of course, so the Swedes found this dead Babylonian.
I don't know.
And,
I don't know the. I don't know all the.
Yeah.
Sounds very culturally diverse.
Yeah.
It's an interesting tune. I really thought one of the coolest tracks I thought, just on how.
Yeah, you got to headbang to this.
Absolutely.
Can't help it.
Absolutely. It's like listening to Amon Amarth. It's like, yeah, you can't stop yourself from like kind of like wishing that it's like, man, I'm trapped in a cubicle. I should be like tearing my enemy's throat out with my teeth in like, yeah, 13th century Scandinavia. But yeah, so I think unless you guys have anything you'd like to add, we'll maybe move on to the next one.
Sounds good.
Okay. What we're going to listen to now is a little track that is called Majula from Dark Souls 2. And I know what you're thinking, and no, my YouTube name does not have anything to do with this track. It is just a coincidence. My name was actually based on a Devin Townsend song called Jular, and it just so happened that this song, which is a pretty cool song, it sounds like my YouTube name, so that's all.
That's weird, man. It's almost meant to be.
You'd think it was almost meant to be. So just to give you guys a little background here, Dark Souls 2, the sequel to Dark Souls 1, and predecessor to Dark Souls 3. Let's listen. No, I'm just kidding.
Even I understood that.
I
Non-gamer.
I am a huge Dark Souls fan. I bought Dark Souls 1, I believe, on release day back in the day. I played it for a bit. I hated it. It was so hard. I remember I got our dad to pick it up for me because he was in the city, and he brought it back, and he was like, "Oh, the guy at the video game store said it's really hard." It's like, whatever, Dad, just give me the game. And I played it for a couple of hours, and I was like, I couldn't figure out how to cast spells. I was running around in circles. I went to an area and just got killed by skeletons.
Are you winning, son?
Shut up, Dad. It's an RPG. That's not how it works. So I hated it, and then I went and played Skyrim instead because that came out 3 days later. And then after a few months, I came back to Dark Souls, and I ended up loving Dark Souls. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I would put it in my top personal 10.
You played, Dave?
I have not. I've almost played those games a number of times, but I've never quite
Pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to admit that I started it long ago, died too many times, got frustrated, and then probably went back to Fallout 4.
Well, here's the
Don't put that in the podcast.
Don't over. Not kidding. I told you he was a casual. Everybody make fun of him. He hasn't even played New Vegas yet. So Dark Souls is a very, very difficult game, but it's not that difficult. It's one of those games where once it clicks with you, and it does click with you, if you persist and you play it long enough, it will click with you.
Yeah.
No one I've ever talked to has not had this experience where all of a sudden they were like, I get it now. And once that happens, it goes from frustrating to like one of the most just like rich and engrossing video game experiences that you can have, in my opinion.
I mean, that's just, I really love that. Like, from a game design perspective, right? Like, if you say you've not met a person that if they persist with it, they click with it. Like, first of all, I love that FromSoft is just willing to, and has always been willing to take that gamble of like, we're just going to make stuff that, you know, we know is going to be super easy to bounce off of, but when you get it, and they can design it so that you do get it, then it's this experience that you can't get any other way. So I really love that there's a company out there that's sticking to their guns that way. And
I think I made that exact point while talking about Kingsfield, which was their first set of games they made, was the Kingsfield games back in the day. Nobody cared about them. Yeah. Everybody in retrospect now is like, it's like buried treasure. Like, why didn't we care? But yeah, the Dark Souls to this day with Elden Ring, which is infinitesimally bigger than Dark Souls ever was in terms of sales, they are still holding fast to this philosophy of like video games. If difficulty is in like the artist's intent, then difficulty can be as much of a game mechanic in like. And overcoming difficulty can produce a specific feeling in the player, and they use that in a way that only video games can to develop a really specific rising action, coming across a particularly difficult boss, forcing you to like by the skin of your teeth overcome this challenge that you swear is impossible, and then giving you this like glorious feeling of triumph before kind of setting you up against a new set of challenges.
Yeah.
But I mean, now I'm just talking about Dark Souls. I knew this would happen. So the important thing to note is that Dark Souls is probably one of the most influential games of the past, more than a decade now. Jeez, came out in 2011. I can't believe that's 13 years ago.
Wow.
One of the most influential games of the past 13 years, easily.
Baker's dozen of years.
And a lot of people love it. And then Dark Souls 2 came out, and I was there at the midnight release for Dark Souls 2. I got the little statue version that came with the cool guy holding a sword because I love Dark Souls 1 so much. And Dark Souls 2 is like to this day like universally, definitely not universally, but it is widely panned as like one of the most like disappointing sequels. And it's not because it's a bad game, but because so many things that Dark Souls 1 was good at are absent in Dark Souls 2, which, it's because they had a very different team at work for Dark Souls 2. Well, the team for Dark Souls 1 went on to make Bloodborne, which incidentally is also one of the greatest video games ever made. They had a sort of a...
Not to be confused with Bloodstorm or whatever Bart was playing.
Bone Storm.
Bone Storm.
It's funny you say that because Bone Storm is... I'm 90% sure it's based on like a mix of Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct, which we just talked about Killer Instinct. So
That's awesome.
No, Dark Souls 2 is based on Lee Carvalho's putting challenge. But yeah, Dark Souls 2, it doesn't retain all of the things. Now it's developed a sort of appreciation as the black sheep over the years. I think there's a lot of great things about Dark Souls 2. One of the things that people do love about Dark Souls 2, whether you actually like the game or you don't, is there's a central hub world called Majula. And in the first Dark Souls, there was a hub world called Firelink Shrine, which was where you start the game. There's a bonfire there. This is where any of the few NPCs who haven't like gone insane and lost their minds, you can redirect them to Firelink Shrine, and it's sort of a cozy. It's not cozy because you're in the middle of a horrifying sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy world, but it's cozy in that it's like the only place in this horrible, horrible world that you're not in like imminent danger of getting killed. So also happens to be the only place in the game where ambient music is played. The game is other than bosses, the game is largely soundtrackless, which is pretty odd for a modern video game. Yeah, for there to just be ambient noise. Dark Souls 2 has the equivalent of Firelink Shrine in Majula, which is a small village that is like up on a cliff. It's very sunny, but not exactly like a happy place either. I'll go ahead and play the track now. It's a very minimalistic track, so obviously feel free to talk over it, but
when you start with Music Box, you're instantly going like, we remember something better than what used to be here, right? Like
true.
Wistful.
Yeah.
Wistful is the perfect word, I think, to describe Majula. So if you listened to the Dark Souls 2 soundtrack, what you would get is probably about 30 epic, bombastic, aggressive boss tracks. Yeah. And then this. So it's really just like Majula's place in the game world itself. It's a very like lone kind of example of like peace in the soundtrack. But so the game, it's the Dark Souls kind of game world is always this. Yeah, it's like post-apocalyptic fantasy, I would say. You're in a world that has gone through cycles of just decay and destruction, and periodic sort of resurgences that are followed by this inevitable cycle of just of I guess decay would probably be the best word to put it.
Yeah.
The world has been rebuilt over itself so many times that like the ruins of ancient civilizations can be found underneath the cities that these like ramshackle cities that are currently built in the world.
Yeah.
Very few people haven't gone what they call hollow in the game, which is just basically you're going insane.
Right.
So yeah, you're what were once regular people are now hostile force in the game. It's not like an RPG where you go to the town and there's like a shopkeeper and you talk to NPCs. You go to a town, it's full of people that are like insane old like zombie people that are trying to kill you, basically. Just to kind of set the stage. It's a very visually beautiful game, and there are these like brief moments of like respite. But by and large, it's like a really sad kind of game that makes a point about the nature of like cycles and the like the transience, I guess, of even like the mightiest kings and the mightiest civilizations fall, and no matter their strength, there's nothing really that can be done about it aside from, you know, accepting that and participating in this cycle, or turning your back on it and leaving the world to become dark forever is kind of the dichotomy of the player choice. So it's a very dense game in its minimalism. There's a lot of really just incredibly thoughtful chunks of lore, but it's never given to you. The story, if you just played through the game without paying attention, there wouldn't be really a story at all.
Yeah.
You need to be talking to people, you need to be reading, you find like items, you can get item descriptions, and they'll like let you piece together what happened to the world. So but yeah, this track is really beloved, despite the fact that there's not really a whole lot to it.
Yeah.
The idea, again, it's like hard to illustrate without, you know, you having played the game, right? But like the idea, the Soul series is really, there's a lot of imagery involving fire, both as a creative, like life-giving force. Like fire gives us warmth, fire gives us light, fire lets us cook, fire is like all these amazing things, but fire also as like a destructive force. Fire burns, fire destroys when it's not controlled, right? So it's lots of fire imagery. Bonfires are the checkpoints in the game. Your character uses embers to like prevent themselves from hollowing and going insane type of thing. And this song kind of brings to mind, in its like minimalism, it feels like kind of makes me think of like little kind of burning embers, but like fading, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like a sunrise and a new beginning. It sounds like a sunset to me, like something is ending. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. There's I haven't played any of these games, but based on your description, like this song just really fits that mood really well. The sort of, there's not a lot of moments where there's two instruments playing at the same time in a harmonically meaningful way. Like you'll get the little kalimba or the music box playing while there's a high sustained string note in the background, or that sort of thing, but there's no harmonic interplay between parts for the most part. It gives this feeling of solitude and frailty. Like this part here, it's like you don't know if that next chord's gonna come, right? The song could kind of end at any point and then get these harp swells that's kind of like a bit more hope and a bit more will to resist this fading hope. It's hope,
and then this almost evokes a kind of dread. This part here specifically, this you'll hear this that like kind of almost like foghorn sounding thing coming in. It just, I don't know, for some reason I always hear that. I think of like the sense of scale of like, oh man, like we are so insignificant in this world. Like
that's the sound of something echoing far off in an empty place.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yeah, totally.
That's
and then back to this like very like frail sort of sense of lots of space in the music that makes you feel small. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, totally. I always thought it was interesting that I've played through this game, even though it's not my favorite Souls game. I've played through it probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9 times, and I always found it interesting that in Majula, which is like a town, it's a normal town, it's grassy, there's sun, it's a sunset or sunrise.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not. There's nothing to like indicate what type of place it is really, other than that. And I always just assumed that it was cold and like chilly.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me while playing it that like none of the characters say that. It's never told to you that this is a cold place.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my brain latched onto this music, and just like assumed due to the sound that this place was cold.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really interesting quality of like that music can have.
Yeah. The high sustained string does that. A lot of the song is in that like upper frequency register. You think of music that represents a cold area in a video game, and you'll get those qualities. A lot of it will be in that upper register. Yeah.
Totally.
Usually.
Yeah, the ice cavern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's something about the chimes or as you say, the music box, but also that weird harmonic scraping.
Yeah.
Like that, and that string patch is probably called Icy Strings on on whatever they used.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And that's true. And that's, again, to me, it's like kind of an amazing thing you can do to make a player of a video game like feel a certain way, just like communicating that, you know, through audio. There may be wind in like a light breeze going through town, which could affect that as well. But all in all, it's definitively not an ambient piece of music, because there is a melody, or at least sort of disparate melodies.
Yeah.
But it's a really like non-obtrusive track to the point where you don't really even notice that much when it's playing.
Yeah.
It kind of just what would you say? It like sort of seats the experience. Like it's I don't know. It's just it's just there, but like in a really good way.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to the way music conveys ideas or conveys emotions, and you said that town is it's sunrise or sunset. Like, I've never played this game, and in my head that's what I was picturing. Like it's absolutely not a high noon song. It's not really a nighttime song.
True.
Like, that was already in my head as an image before you said that.
Interesting.
And it always makes you wonder too, not to nerd out or be too philosophical, but exactly what level or degree of intentionality was the composer putting into it with the game, with that set and setting in mind. And as somebody who has attempted and sometimes succeeded to create music that's evocative, sometimes I think the intentionality isn't even at 10 out of 10, but things work out in a mysterious way. And I know many have speculated about the true nature of, creating, artful creation, and how exactly things play out in that realm. And not that I'm conspiratorial or delusional about that process, but there are weird synchronicities and things that happen when you seek, you set out to create a piece of art and things just fall into place, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just a thought that was in my head. Too early, not enough coffee.
I totally agree with that, and it's something that I think about a lot, actually, is like the degree to which a lot of like the signs and symbols and like those ideas and how they correlate to real life and things, how much of that is conscious on the part of the artist and how much of that is just us inferring things.
Yeah.
And I think, broadly speaking, the conclusion I have come to after like analyzing a lot of video games is it almost doesn't matter, because I listen to a podcast called Resonant Arc, and these guys do much more like very deep dives into games. It's not like an edited thing like I do, like they're just podcasting. So they'll spend dozens of hours talking about Xenogears, and one of the guys on the show, Kaysen, is really obsessed with like symbols and things like that. And his sort of, I think, ethos when it comes to that sort of thing is like, we're not always aware of how we're putting ourselves and our thoughts into our art, and signs and symbols reflect back onto us, into the work we do, and produce meaning even where specific types of meaning weren't exactly in like put into it, which is why I hate the type of rhetoric that surrounds this like media literacy is this thing now. There's a specific type of person that believes they have a monopoly on interpretation. And if you don't subscribe to that, they will claim that you don't have media literacy, which to me just is the most anti-art, anti-human sentiment you can have.
Yeah.
I understand that some people don't always like, they'll miss the forest for the trees, or there will be like an obvious bit of symbolism that people will miss.
Yeah.
But like the ability to interpret, sometimes, you know, I've written things, even in scripts just talking about games, where people will be like, oh, hey, did you mean this when you said that? And I'll be like, I didn't, but like maybe I did. Like that's like, I didn't really think about it like that. It's an interesting way of looking at it. So it's, I think, just to that point, I think you're correct that sometimes there is just synchronicities. Things just work in a certain way. I totally believe that, and I think that there's just as much value in like kind of understanding and seeing that as there is if somebody just flat out said, "Oh yeah, the wind chime is supposed to resemble how windy it is," and I was thinking of Nathan For You pulling out his modern art show, and then they're like, I really like this Tank of America because it's like showing like that America and like the sort of like military industrial complex. And then Nathan's just like, actually, I just put Tank of America because when you put your money in the bank, it's really safe like a tank.
Love it.
Yeah, it's just so
literal as literal can be.
Completely on the
but
nose.
also nonsensical.
But somebody found something there. Somebody found something to chew on in that thing.
Yeah. I think there's a level as any sort of artist where you build up this network of references in your head. So, you know, and some of that's conscious and some of that's unconscious. You know, in the case of this piece, you know, the main instrument, this sort of music box sounding kalimba-ish thing, you know, that to me has this association with memory, and that makes sense because I've seen films where a character has a music box that signifies, you know, it's an important memento from their past, and that music, you know, is that link to the past. Unintentional.
Speaking of great games.
That link to the past for them. And then that gets taken up by someone else who, you know, maybe doesn't have an explicit connection to a music box in that same sense, but evokes that same... And you sort of hear and encounter that enough that it builds this connection in your mind. And as an artist, I think it's... You build that network of connections through your experiences and through observing patterns. But there's... You build up this network of connections, but a lot of producing art for a lot of people is, you know, you kind of have to turn off that sort of an analytical part of your brain and kind of get into a zone or a flow. And so that stuff's all there, but yeah, like I say, a lot of it's operating subconsciously, and you're not always entirely conscious of why you're making these choices, why you're doing this. Sometimes, yeah, it just happens to fit apart from intention. Obviously, a lot of the time it is intentional, but
Right.
Yeah, certainly, yeah, that line between purpose and intention and coincidence is pretty blurry, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, there's a group you guys may have heard of called Swans. They've become very popular amongst the hipster crowd in recent years because they've like had a resurgence. But they're like they started in the 80s as like a no wave band, so sort of just like the most aggressive amelodic like punk music you can think of.
Yeah.
And the main guy of Swans, which is a funny way of saying the band leader, the main character, the protagonist of Swans, Michael Gira, is one. There's like there's types of artists where you can just listen to their work and then it's just like, yeah, there's no like, they're not trying to break their own thoughts down into constituent parts and put them into the music. They're just creating something. Almost in like an unthinking way, like you said, kind of putting aside the analytical part. Michael Gira, David Lynch, the filmmaker, you watch his stuff and it's just like, it doesn't matter what he specifically is trying to say because what he's creating is so like reflective of so many different things that like there's a quality in that makes it, that gives it like value, So, yeah. So, how did we end up here? I don't even remember.
Where are we?
You were talking about like how the instruments, how they mean different things when we hear them, or like it can sound icy, sound cold, and how much of that is really intentional or not.
Yeah.
To that I say, probably more than we think, but not as much as it could be, and it doesn't matter. That's the way that I would think about it.
The answer is we don't know.
The answer is we don't know. That's the correct answer. But I think a lot of
we're sure
time,
as hell going to pretend like we do. No, just kidding.
Yes, exactly. That's what we've been doing this whole time. So I think we'll move on. We'll move on to a couple of simpler, lighter tracks here. First of all, let's do Lufia 2, The Last Duel.
Sounds good.
That's a very, very Super Nintendo track. Lufia 2, pretty late Super Nintendo RPG. I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't played it. There goes my RPG cred out the window again already. But I know that it's really a really beloved game. I've had many requests from people for me to cover it. And I listened to most of the entire soundtrack in addition to this song, and it's a pretty ripping soundtrack. Yeah. It is very cool, but it's like, you can hear it, you'll know it's a Super Nintendo track. That bass line, huh?
Yeah, that might be like the biggest fingerprint of the Super Nintendo, is that sort of like galloping bass line.
Yeah.
I love how the hats at the beginning were they were eighth notes or whatever, and then the big fill, and then the 16th notes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is happening.
Totally. Yeah. It speeds things along. Would you be able to guess what part of the game this plays in an RPG? Dave, I'll go with you because I know you played more RPGs in your life.
Is this a trick question? Like the title is The Last Duel. Does it take place during The Last Duel?
Okay, well, I guess that does kind of give it away. Not during.
Incorrect.
As far as I
was
can
the
tell.
first
Is it the
Duel.
build up to like the battle with some like rival? Is it not like the big bad, but like a personal rival of the protagonist?
I think you're pretty on the money here. I don't know if it's specifically a rival, like was once a friend of the main character or anything, but you are correct that it is the build up to a battle with someone who's not the main bad guy.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
It does have that like emotional like.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to fight each other, and we're not gonna like it, but it's gonna have to happen. Kind of.
The sort of solo trumpet in the A part is like giving me big like kind of spaghetti western vibes, like kind of Ennio Morricone.
Oh,
kind of. I mean, the solo
Totally.
trumpet is, just that. I don't know, just that representation of the protagonist, kind of alone. In the face.
Oh
of,
yeah, totally.
Lots of like leaps up by a fifth, which is the sort of very like kind of classic heroic. I did not land that train of thought, but
No, it's all good.
This song makes me want to play Cold as Ice.
You're as cold as ice, Michael. Willing to sacrifice. Oh, you know what? There's something there. There's something there.
A little bit.
Wish you didn't point it out.
I just noticed those suspensions that create that suspense. You see, suspensions in music create.
Hence the name.
they sure do.
Sorry.
That's my observation for the day.
No, it's good.
But it's
This part coming up here, this like kind of
stacking.
rising tension.
And then the delivering of the epic conclusion to that.
Yeah, but then that minor resolution, it's like I don't really want to be fighting this guy, or
yeah.
I don't know. There's like this mix of kind of triumphant soaring melody with this kind of grounding back in these minor resolutions that are kind of, it's not like there's a sadness. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making stuff up. I don't know anything
agree.
about Lufia 2. But.
No,
You're on point.
No, I it's definitely like a non kind of obvious path for the song to take.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those trumpets, man, those Super Nintendo trumpets, those
I
are the
wish
best.
I had a trumpet patch as good as that.
This really reminds me of you ever play ActRaiser? I know Will hasn't.
I have played a little bit of ActRaiser at your recommendation, I think. But,
Oh, yeah?
I don't know if I would remember anything about the music in that game.
Yeah, that's fair. It was composed by a, again, very, very prolific composer named Yuzo Koshiro,
Okay.
who is very active. Actually, weirdly enough, he was on like the local radio. Not he himself, but a local radio station was playing video game music the other day, and Yuzo Koshiro was being talked about, which I thought was weird.
Like local to us?
Yes.
Weird.
Yeah, I think maybe it might have been the university radio station, which would make the most sense.
Does make more sense.
But yeah, it's a very kind of like funky style. This reminds me a lot of that.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we'll just have a direct on-ramp to the next song, which is in this sort of a similar vein here. Quest 64,
Oh.
Highland. All right, you like it, you sickos? You finally got me to talk about Quest 64, okay? All right, here it is, me talking about Quest 64. Here, let me open this up by saying
Oh man, that's a trip.
Quest 64 is widely considered to be a bad RPG. In recent years, there has been what we may call a resurgence of Quest 64 apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
I do not subscribe to that. I think that Quest 64 is not a good game, but it is a game that I do have some nostalgia for. Played it back in the day. It's got a pretty ripping soundtrack. I'll go ahead and play this song. This is Highland, Quest 64. Oh, but you didn't know the song was going there, huh?
it is really hard to know where this song is going. All the changes are incredibly abrupt.
You know what? For as much as I don't care for Quest 64, it's got a pretty cool soundtrack for an N64 game, and weirdly, one that doesn't really sound like an N64 game.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have N64 qualities to it to me. It sounds more like an early PS1 game and almost a Super Nintendo game.
It sounds like an evolved Super Nintendo more than... And I feel like I should know more of this. Like, do you know how sound works on the Nintendo 64? Like, it's...
My understanding is that the Nintendo 64...
Like, it's all sample-based.
Yes,
You
well
edit
on
that
the
out,
keys.
sorry.
Absolutely not. My understanding is that the N64 doesn't have a dedicated sound chip, so sound had to be directly programmed onto the cartridges themselves, and so the more ambitious and like the bigger a soundtrack was, basically the less space there would be for other things, because sound is obviously a huge, right?
Yeah, and it's all sample-based, right? Like...
I think
Yeah.
so, yes.
And-
yeah, it's like a sound fonts and stuff.
Yeah, and are you... Was there... Like, did Nintendo have standardized sound fonts for things, or were there, like, libraries?
Like libraries that Nintendo, like adjacent developers would pull from? you mean?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I know that, like, Nintendo internally used a lot of the same, like, if you listen to Star Fox 64, Ocarina of Time, and Super Mario 64,
Yeah.
you will catch many of the same samples
Yeah.
in the same, the same library. But, like, as far as, like, you know, Rare obviously used a lot of the same stuff in their games, but I
Yeah.
don't know if there was anything that was standardized. I think is basically as long as it fit onto the cartridge, then they kind of let anything
Yeah.
go.
So what's giving this song its unique? Is it just like a drastically different sample library, or is this song... I wonder if this song is sampling more synth-heavy stuff that it's using in an orchestral way rather than just using a string sample sometimes, and that's maybe giving it that Super Nintendo. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually not too sure. I think the company that made Quest was like, they came for Quest and then the exit stage left. I don't think so. I it would be interesting to hear if they have anything else like available to be able to make that, like, that comparison.
Yeah.
It's a pretty solid track. I like it. It's called Highland, right?
Yes.
I think it evokes some sort of highland, if you will.
Beautifully said.
But yeah, those kind of very basic sucky string patches, as you say, Dave. Yeah, they kind of use them in an orchestral manner. You know, there's the plucky string one there or whatever, and then, you know, this is meant to the lead, whatever it's really supposed to be. It's sort of vaguely a trumpet or a clarinet or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's. Oh, you are right
There's so
there.
many. I'm good.
Yeah, what I find interesting too, especially compared to the PS1, is like the instrument samples for N64 games like this. They're really like abrupt. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of fade in or like crossfade between instruments. I'm probably not using the term crossfade properly. It's just how I think of it, editing video and stuff. Like, it'll just be like it'll just kind of enter without like being like
Yeah. So the PS1, like, the CDs had way more storage space on them than the cards, right?
Yes, they did. Although PS1 games didn't always use like Redbook audio playback from CDs, I think a fair number actually of PlayStation 1 games did use like sequenced music.
Yeah. Okay.
But yes, they would have had way more sound fidelity available.
Yeah. Because, when you're, you know, there's different approaches to doing stuff, but when you're using, you know, you don't have your whole bass line recorded. You just have one bass sample note that you're telling the CPU to pitch shift.
Yeah.
You know, to get your melody. And if you just didn't use a didn't bother applying a envelope to the volume, or maybe I should stop talking. I don't know what I'm talking about right here, and someone's gonna know that I'm an idiot here.
No, it's easy to feel speechless when you're talking about Quest 64. I think.
Good save.
I think. Sorry, I was just so stuffed all of a sudden. Son of a-
Talking about like harmonic progression and the feeling that's giving you, like you've got these little chords in the background. Da,
Yeah.
ba. So those are all sus2 chords, right?
Whoa there.
I want to go jazz voicings, but that's not.
Yeah. I think it's just sus2 chords that are moving down and up a whole step. I could be wrong on that, but suspended chords start showing up in music that people are writing centuries ago. The idea is you're wanting to create these moments of tension and release, and they start off as when you're moving from one chord to another, you're holding one of the notes from the previous chord that's usually a semitone away from a note in the chord you're moving to, and that creates this tension that you want to get resolved, right? So if I'm moving from a C chord to a G chord there, I can hold this C. That's my suspended chord. And then that C really wants to get pulled down to that B natural to get my G major there. So that's a sus4 chord going into G major. So this song is having these stabs of these suspended chords. I can't remember. Maybe that wasn't. Anyways,
Wait, what key were we in?
I don't know. I'm just playing whatever key. I'm not that good at identifying.
Might be
Oh.
wrong. I don't
Yeah.
know what the bass is doing.
Yeah, I was hearing a lot of suspensions there, but those you're taking them out of the context that they kind of first come up in, where you have this kind of built-in tension and release, and it's just tension. It just feels unresolved. There's no voice leading in there in the way they're kind of classically used, and that's used. I feel like it's giving you this effect of like I don't know anything about Quest 64, but it feels to me like I'm lost in these highlands. Like it feels like a disorienting place. It feels foggy. It feels.
I think that's an interesting observation, because the context surrounding this music and where it's played in game, I believe, is I think the town itself might be called Highland.
Okay.
But basically, it's like it's very close to the end of the game, and this town and this whole area, it's very dark and like kind of decrepit, and it's like living under the thumb of like a tyrant sort of thing. So for there to be continually unresolved kind of tension throughout the song, I think actually like thematically makes sense, because it's supposed to be like a pretty bad place to live, and it's also like very close to like the end of the game before you go to fight who is it, Mammon, I think is the bad guy in Quest 64. Yeah, very creative guys. Mammon, I mean, really. No, it's probably anybody's first exposure to Mammon back in the day,
That last section
other than
there.
Chrono Trigger. Oh
They've
yeah, the
got
kind
those,
of.
those kind of.
You want me to play it back here?
They're obviously notes within the scale.
You're a genius, Will.
That's not true. But just those. Yeah, those stacking tones, they're inevitably kind of sad, a little bit dissonant, because they're not. It's not 1, 3, 5. You get that 9 in there.
Yeah.
Oh, I love 9. I don't know why.
Oh yeah.
9's my favorite.
What?
Or 2.
What is it?
however
What?
you wanna-
For let's say you're talking to somebody like, say, me, who like when you say I love 9, I don't know what 9 is. What do you mean when you say
Just
9?
the number 9.
Oh, you just love the number
I
9.
love the number.
It's a cool
9.
number.
Yeah.
I mean, who could disagree?
I guess that's more. I don't know, Dave. You explain these things so much better than me. But like when I think of 9 in like the jazz parlance, it's the 9th, note on any given scale or whatever. But that's kind of how you phrase it, like more in a jazz way. It's really the second note. One. Dave, I need your help.
Yeah. So when we're talking about numbers, it's just a scale tone. So if I was Will, I would match the key of the song we were actually playing. But because I'm a piano dummy, I'm just going to play this in C major, which is easiest for me.
Sure.
So C major scale, we would just refer to these tones as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If I go one note above the scale, that's an octave above my 2 here. But the way you voice things matters. So if I play a C major triad here, I can play it closed or I can play it open. It's the same notes. It's a very different kind of, how you feel that. So the 9 against the 1 versus the 2 against the 1, 2 against 1 just feels they're clashing. 9 against 1.
Yeah.
If I put that D, which is the second tone of the scale, above the 8th note of the scale, it becomes the 9. That's a different feel to.
What is it about the 9 that you love so much, Will?
Well, I mean, it's a common. I just have I have a love for jazz and jazz fusion, and like it's just a very common, rich. It can add a richness to any given voicing. Like I'll just play a random voicing, like. So the 9 in this instance.
Oh yeah.
The 9th scale, would be the F sharp. This is an E minor. None of this will make the podcast, I'm sure, but now
This is all
now I'm
making.
just
You better
Googling
believe
it.
it's making the podcast. This is
But,
great.
that would be the 9th. Like if the root is way down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you can keep stacking, right? So then on top of that, you got 10, 11. The 11 would be the A here. So, or if you want to really make a mess of things, you do a flat 9.
Ooh. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that
Just totally
keyboard's probably still clipping a little bit, but nonetheless, that was a wonderful demonstration. Thank you.
I have no idea where I was going with that,
really,
but
that really hit. That
it's
really
fun
hit
to
in some
play a
kind of
piano
way.
when it's sitting right in front of you. I think it's a great idea that Dave brought this.
I think Quest 64's music it's kind of hard to talk about in a way because it's just sort of like the epitome of like a solid kind of soundtrack. Like there's nothing kind of like exceptionally different about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I saw somebody wrote a comment on one of the tracks in the Quest 64 soundtrack on YouTube, and it said something like, this is the soundtrack that will like evoke nostalgia for this game, even if you've never played it, which I thought was kind of an interesting observation. And I think there's probably some truth to that. And there's something about perhaps the sound font and the low fidelity and just the way that it sounds like every kind of JRPG in a way.
Yeah.
That does like kind of evoke nostalgia. And it just so happens.
When I heard the song, I'm like, did I play this game? I
did.
don't think I did play the game.
You probably played it, but you probably didn't play it that much. I had Quest 64, but I remember our cousin. I'll edit out his name in case he doesn't want to be first named on the podcast. But our cousin named owned Quest 64, and I remember in their basement they played it, and they definitely beat it. And it stunk then, and it stinks now. No, I'm just kidding. Well, no, I'm not. But
You just lost one subscriber.
I made a Quest 64 joke in one of the first big videos I made, and you'd be surprised how many people came in just swinging. They did not take that Quest 64 slander lying down. I'm like, this game has fans? Really? I learned that day. Apparently, there's a sizable number of people who really think Quest 64... Okay, there's like the people who think it's underappreciated, and that I think we can extend an olive branch across the aisle. Then there's people who think that it's legitimately a great RPG, and that's I have to stop short of that. It's really a fundamentally flawed RPG. That's like, it was not good. It wasn't good. But you can love it, and I love that you love it, and you're wonderful, and you're no less a valuable person if you like Quest 64. I just don't.
It's just like nuts and carrot cake. I mean, I don't judge you if you think that they belong in there, but on the other hand, you're wrong. Please edit that out.
Nuts and carrot cake is gonna get you killed. Will they're gonna kill him out there? I gotta do something.
I should have come up with a better example.
Nuts and carrot. That's pretty good. Raisins in carrot cake too. Pecans and cinnamon buns. Some people are gonna have a problem with that.
Dave,
What do you have to say about
Dave's
that?
like nuts and carrot cake's my favorite. thing.
I'm not gonna put nuts in carrot cake, but I'll eat it.
You won't turn your nose up.
I'm
at
not.
it.
Yeah,
with you
I,
there.
I try not to turn my nose up at.
Yeah, raisins in carrot cake. Actually, that's too much for me.
That's
oh
a
really?
sin.
That I don't know.
Do we disagree
The
on this?
people who are like vehemently anti raisins in baked goods, like it ruins it. I will not touch a cinnamon bun that has raisins. I don't quite understand that.
Well, let me
I
explain.
can understand. I can understand not liking it, but I can't understand like I would really enjoy a cinnamon bun versus like, and then to go to like, I just won't eat this cinnamon bun
Okay.
because it has raisins.
Well, let me
I-
play devil's advocate
understand
here.
what
You guys
Yeah.
just heard me get fired in real time.
Dave. Unfortunately, this is all Dave's gear, so we can't fire him for his
Yeah, true.
controversial opinion.
Yes.
The problem with the raisin is that for being so condensed, it packs such a strong flavor to the point where when you're eating a baked good that should have like a relatively like neutral, soft, buttery flavor, whatever you're eating will taste like raisins. You know, there's no avoiding the raisin. It's just a strong, you know, the dry texture, the texture of dried fruit isn't something that a lot of people gel with.
Raisins are like the wettest dried fruit.
Okay.
It's true.
Yeah, well, apricots maybe would give them a run for their money.
Maybe I feel like a raisin's got more honest to goodness moisture in it. I think the apricot just maybe feels moister because it's bigger.
I don't want any moisture in my cinnamon bun other than this delectable cinnamon goodness and perhaps a smattering of cream cheese
you're
icing.
just complaining about the raisin's dryness. Anyways,
Old wrinkly grapes.
I hate their dryness. I hate their wetness. I hate everything about them.
What's weird is I really like chocolate raisins, but
That is weird.
can't
Yeah.
figure that one out.
Yeah, like glossettes.
But in other
Chocolate
forms-
almonds all day long, but chocolate raisins. Interesting.
anyways.
That's sickening. No, I'm kidding.
I'm gonna redirect what I can respect not liking to eat a food and not wanting to. That's fine.
Not me. I can't respect it at all. I hate anyone who's different than I am when it comes to eating things.
The most like benign version of prejudice.
Yeah.
Hating other people who
I-
think differently.
I don't
about
have a
food.
racist bone in my body, but if you like raisins in food, I will give you a sneer when you walk past me on the street.
I shall advocate for your imprisonment.
All right. On that wonderful note, I think we'll move on to, again, a lot of hard pivots here. We're going to listen to Streets of Rage 4. Rising Up is the name of the song. Again, a song that is cool and surprised me. So I'm just going to like let it play in the beginning because I think there's quite a build-up in this song. Let's see here. Streets of Rage 4 was released in 2020. Streets of Rage 3 was released in 1994. So anybody waiting for a follow-up to Streets of Rage 3 waited 26 years for this game? So this game is a beat 'em up. Again, not a genre that I really partake in all that much, other than River City Ransom and the Scott Pilgrim versus the World game, which is basically just River City Ransom, but with better graphics. Those are two beat 'em up games I'll participate in. But any beat 'em up fans in the room? Anybody like a beat 'em up game?
No, I mean, yeah, no.
All right.
I don't know why that
Fair
answer
enough.
was hard for me to get out of my mouth, but
You were maybe thinking, perhaps. Okay,
Yeah.
well, actually, let me let me say that there are a couple of games that are sort of like action games that are like beat 'em up adjacent for sure. Like Mad World is a really cool game. It's like a Nintendo Wii game.
Right.
It's black and white,
Yeah.
like Sin City, but the blood is red, and it's just incredibly violent. Excuse me. I thought it was super cool when I was a teenager, and except for the fact that you have to waggle the Wii remote to play the game.
It's like you're really beating someone up.
Yeah, I mean that's what it wants you to do, but you end up just looking like an idiot.
The song sounds like Putin's walkout song when he walks into his throne room. It's almost got that like Tetris-y quality to it.
Like the Russian quality.
Yeah, Rasputin. It's like the 1 to 5 thing or whatever.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You know.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I know. I totally know what you're talking about. Which is very weird because I don't think this song is really.
Well, we're in a different part of the song now.
Yeah, we've officially moved on from the Russian walkout music.
Sorry.
That's all good. It's all good.
That's a good run there. Sorry.
When I first was listening to this, I was like, okay, this is like a cool whatever background electronic song.
Yeah.
But I don't really get like what is that special about it until around this point.
This part's fun.
When I started realizing, oh, I know what this song is doing. Like, I know what's about to happen. This is about to be the coolest song ever of all time, is what's happening here. This is like
This is very 80s synthwave.
retro wave,
So synthwave.
big time. Yeah, which is just an objectively cool genre. I don't care who you are.
That detuned lead is just
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, it's so awesome. And again, this is a beat 'em up, so the entire point, if you're not adrenaline fueled and having the time of your life, and the game is failing, and right at around this point where that like drop hits, it's like, all right, I know that I would be smiling while playing this game. We're about to enter like the epic zone. That's so awesome. I was listening to the song in the car for the first time, and I knew I had to keep I was like, if I don't like watch my feet right now, I'm gonna be driving 180 down the highway. We live in Canada, by the way, so it's not as bad as it sounds the most. But just perfect like racing, driving music. And this entire sequence in the game takes place in an elevator.
Okay.
Which is something kind of interesting too, is like the song almost has kind of like movements to it. There's like different defined sections.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, how do they know? Like, what if I'm not doing something cool when the cool part happens?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I could be like walking, I could be lifting up garbage cans to try and find healing items while like the drop hits.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's in an elevator and you have no choice but to do what the game wants you to
Yeah.
do allows them to like kind of make this bespoke track.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great place to put like this kind of probably a fan favorite track, I would
Yeah.
think.
That that speaks to one of like the big challenges of writing for video games, is that you're writing music to, you know, score something that's akin to a film that you have no control over what's happening because of the player agency. And so there's obviously a lot of soundtracks that find very clever ways to match the score to what the player is doing on screen. But yeah, as a composer, it must be a real treat whenever you get these sequences. It's like,
Totally.
I have a lot more control over what's happening, and I can actually like flex those muscles of scoring to the action, which you just usually
Yeah.
don't get the opportunity to do as a video game composer.
Yeah, totally. It's almost like this like whole song is kind of cinematic in that way.
For sure.
And that kind of like highlights the difference between composing music for movies versus composing music for games.
Yeah.
It's having that level of control over the scene where you don't in a game.
Yeah.
So it's
How old is this game?
it's like it's just a couple years old. It's pretty new.
Okay. I'm almost visualizing a more older looking game for some reason in my brain when I hear this track, but
Probably due
like
to the
to see
80s-ness of it. probably due to the fact that it's deliberately like written as a throwback to like that retro 80s style, which is I think Streets of Rage as a series was made in the 80s, but obviously you wouldn't be able to like pack this quality of music in like a video game back then.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there's some pretty complicated synth tones. Like
This is so Russian. You're so right.
yeah,
I don't know why I didn't pick up on that. This is like if Tetris was remade. This was like the type of heavy electronic Russian music.
really distorted arpeggios there, and yeah, there's that synth part at the beginning that sounds very like, you know, some fancy FM synthesis going on, or wave folding or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
What-
But if you start singing like a certain way, it'll sound like a Muse song.
You have this hilarious way of like making songs cooler and then like abruptly making them way worse.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said, though.
That's up there, probably. This is kind of a trippy, weird little interlude there, which doesn't lead into a different part of the song. It's just the same.
yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're kind of in limbo here.
totally. Yeah, at this point, it's like a trance. Like they're just building you up to like get into the rhythm of like cracking guys' skulls and throwing them off the elevator. I'm assuming you can throw them off.
It's so weird.
That is an odd.
I mean, there's kind of like a subharmonic that makes that like a minor.
All right. Well, that coolness all wrapped up. Of course, right before the cool bit again.
Yeah, this part's rad.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take a long time to
There's
find
the 9,
this.
guys.
Oh yeah. It's Will's 9, we call it. A Will's
It's just
9.
that right above the tonic note.
And this is just
Just
so
adds an emotional quality.
Knight Rider saving the day quality.
This is
to this.
anthemic.
Vigilante. Doesn't this sound like it's like Miami Vice? Like there, something cool is about to happen
Yeah.
in the show type of thing.
No, can't do it.
Not fast enough. All right, hold on. I just got to let it drop before we move on. I wouldn't want to deny anyone the pleasure.
the bass.
Drop. It's the best. Yeah, so classic. I like that retro wave is still a thing. I about 10 years ago I was like, I wonder if this is a fad. There's still value to it. I dig it. All right, yeah. So next up, I've got from the video game Solstice. We got the title theme. Solstice, released in 1990 for the NES, and that makes the track kind of remarkable in some ways. I'll go ahead and give it a play here. Solstice title theme.
Oh, yeah.
To reiterate, this was a NES original Nintendo game.
Yeah.
So great.
This is prog rock.
Yeah.
100% it is.
This is like Gentle Giant, this part. And then the next
Totally.
part's like close to the edge, but yeah.
Yeah, it definitely, he obviously cut his teeth on like Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
Yes, Jethro Tull. Like you can
Artist
totally
so
hear it.
Emerson, right?
Right?
Yeah.
This gentle giant.
Right? Yeah. Big time.
Yes.
This is what modern chiptune artists are trying to recapture when they make this type of retro music.
Yeah.
So, Dave, you seemed to have at least a cursory knowledge of the composer of this track. Eh? You wanna give me the lowdown?
Yeah, so Tim Follin has this reputation of being like the best retro video game composer you've never heard of, because he writes stuff like this. He had this ability to push the sound hardware in these old systems to their limits, but he just always worked on like these crap games that no one's ever played. So yeah, you have this like rad music and these kind of really weird, kind of funny games. And he has a bit of a reputation of just, he would write music and not really care what was happening in the game. He would just write the music he wanted to write and didn't really write to what was happening in the game at all. Which, maybe is a reason he didn't get a ton of work in the field on better games. But
right.
Yeah. What do you?
Yeah, I think that covers it pretty well. Tim Follin, the same way that you have those like artists from like the 70s and probably the 60s as well, who were just like Brian Eno, for example, was sort of like, would probably describe himself as, he thought he was like more of an engineer almost than a musician, right? And you had these people who were kind of tinkering with the tech to see what it was capable of. I think Tim Follin also falls into that, although he certainly is a composer as well. Like, just his ability to like eke these crazy arpeggio-based melodies like out of the NES sound chip. It's such a weirdly like rich sound for a very, very sad little sound chip.
Yeah. So should we talk about the sound chip a little bit?
If you have information on the sound chip,
I have information.
I would love to hear about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's cut the track.
Sure.
So the NES sound chip. So there's a bit of a, that era of gaming. Memory is pretty expensive, right? And to have recorded audio samples, that's really expensive to put into memory. It takes up a lot of space, and so the NES has its own sound chip. It's basically a synthesizer in the console itself, and rather than putting a recorded song in the memory of the chip, you just had the instructions to play the song, and the cartridge tells the console, please play this music. And the console has the hardware in it to do that. And so the NES sound chip has, very specifically, has it's got 5 channels of audio total, and it has to the music has to share those channels with the sound effects.
Which is why music in old NES games notoriously would often cut out, or like layers, like you'd lose the drums because there was so much happening on the screen that it couldn't like keep all of the different layers going. Right?
I have a very distinct memory as a kid playing the original Final Fantasy, and moving the cursor in a menu would make a little blip sound, and realizing like, oh, if I just do this constantly, I lose an entire
the bass
line of
disappears
the music
for half a
and feel
second.
like, hey, what are they trying to pull here? Like, anyway, so the NES has 2 channels that produce pulse waves, which sound like this. That's a pulse wave. You can adjust the pulse width of this wave, and that gives it a slightly different timbre. So that's a narrower wave, and that's a narrower still. So you can do that. The NES is capable of doing that.
And if you were looking at this music sort of like in that YouTube link to the Tim Follin's, you can see the oscilloscope view. That would change the length of the waves that if you were looking at the waveforms?
Not the length of the wave. So the length of the waves is its frequency essentially, and that adjusts pitch. But when we're talking about the pulse width, so a pulse wave, like a 50-50 pulse wave, you can imagine, maybe it's easier to start with a sine wave. Sine wave, that shape, it curves up gently, curves down, back up. The pulse wave doesn't have that gentle curve. It just goes straight up. It's at its max amplitude, flat, and then it goes straight down at its lowest amplitude. And so the pulse width is basically the ratio between how much time does it spend at its max amplitude and how much time does it spend at its lowest amplitude. So if it's a 50-50 pulse, it's going to be spending as much time at the top of its amplitude as the bottom. If it's a 25, 75 width, then it's going to spend 25% of its cycle at the top of its amplitude and 75% of the bottom. This is, just look up NES music oscilloscope, and you will see these waveforms presented on the screen, and it's going to make a lot more sense.
So as you affect that ratio, you change the timbre, the quality of the sound.
Yeah, and so this is a very narrow kind of pulse, and this would be a 50-50 pulse.
One sounds like more like a square wave, and then you get into what? Is it still square, or is it rectangular?
It's still square. Yeah, pulse and square wave are kind of interchangeable. So if you have a synthesizer with a pulse width modulation knob on it, that's changing that pulse width over time in a smooth way, and that has a very pleasant sort of effect. But the NES can't smoothly interpolate between these different pulse widths. You just have to tell the console, when you play this note, play it with this pulse width. And I was just trying to figure out why this music sounds so much richer and fuller than a lot of other NES music, and so I was looking at other oscilloscope views of NES songs, and it doesn't look like a lot of other composers are playing with that pulse width a lot. They kind of like set it and forget it, whereas our friend Tim here is like very intentionally
modifying
changing the timbre. He'll do effects where I'm not sure if he does it in this song, but
I've got a few other Tim Follin tracks on here as well.
And I don't know that I'd necessarily be able to identify it, but he'll play the same note repeatedly very quickly, and he'll oscillate that pulse width from note to note, and that creates a very kind of distinct aural effect.
Does he have to do that manually while he's
real time? He's probably
reprograms it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's MIDI information that the NES cartridge is sending, or if it's its own proprietary thing, but yeah, he would be programming that on a note-by-note basis, as far as I understand. So the NES sound chip is also capable of producing a triangle wave in one channel, and our triangle wave is going to sound a lot. So this is our square, and this is a triangle wave here.
Okay.
So much softer.
Way softer, yeah.
These are often used for bass.
Bass. Huh. Interesting.
And then you get a white noise channel, or a noise channel,
which will probably primarily be used for sound effects in a lot of games.
Yeah, sound effects and percussion, right? So if you take, just give me a moment here. If I take this noise and really, I'm getting a little hi-hat there. If I filter it, I can get more of a snare sound there. So the white noise, you can filter it, you can adjust the attack and decay, and so you can use that to get some percussion sounds, and that's probably primarily most of the percussion in most NES soundtracks towards the front end of the console's lifetime, because as the console aged, memory to put in the cartridge got cheaper, and the NES also has a slot for sampled sounds. It's not very high resolution.
No, definitely not.
But you can hear, if you compare the soundtrack from Super Mario Bros. 1 to Super Mario Bros. 3, the Super Mario Bros. 3, you'll start hearing actual drum samples played versus just the white noise kind of drum.
Some developers even managed to squeeze voices into the NES, which is kind of a miracle.
I'm bad.
Correct. I'm bad.
Yeah. So that's you get a sense if you've played Bad Dudes or another game that uses vocal samples.
There's a Bible game that they managed to get. Go on, courageous one. Like they managed to squeeze voices into it somehow.
Yeah. So you get a sense
That's a
of
literal
like,
miracle.
the fidelity of these samples that they're using, because it's only. I'm gonna get yelled at by someone, but the bit rate on these samples is not high, and
Right.
the lower your bit rate, the less information in that sample gets through, essentially. So Tim is doing a number of tricks in this track to make it sound more full. Like I mentioned, he's playing with the pulse width a lot more. There's a trick with the triangle wave, so he's using it for his bass line, but you can use the triangle wave to reinforce drums and make them sound punchier by, right at the attack of the note. He's actually basically bending the pitch very low, so it's kind of registering more in line with the percussion, then bending it up to the bass note. And hearing at full speed, you don't hear that the bass isn't hitting like right on the downbeat. But again, if you look at an oscilloscope view, you'll see the triangle wave in that track. Every time there's like a kick drum or something, it kind of bends very quickly and comes back to a much more stable waveform. And so he's using the triangle track to support the drums to add a lot more kind of like rich frequency down there. And then I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think he's pulling a sneaky trick with the sample track, because this song is using the sample track for its percussion. But again, if you look at the oscilloscope view and you pause it, you'll see, a noise of a natural sound like a drum the waveform of that will look very kind of, random and noisy, compared to just like a pulse wave or synth wave. But you'll be able to see like kind of pulse waves in that track. And I think he's making like a little submix of his song and putting that in the sample track. I could be completely wrong on that. But I think he's using that as a sneaky trick to get more voices out of the NES's sound chip, because he made a little submix.
Which
of the
seems
song.
to have worked kind of well.
Yeah, so I could be wrong on that. I couldn't substantiate any of that with my research. But if you are interested, there's a channel, Retro Game Audio, on YouTube, and he's got a Tumblr blog as well that has a lot of interesting information in this line.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of other Tim Follin tracks here that I think might be fun to listen to as well. This one is the title theme from the Pictionary game on the first Nintendo.
Wow. He got some heavy hitters there.
Yeah, right? And I'd like to just point out the fact that Pictionary goes harder than Mario, Bionic Commando, Zelda, Metroid.
I saw one comment on this video that said, like, I don't know if Tim knows what Pictionary is.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you aware that this is like the most boring possible game you could be composing for? I don't know that. I've never played Pictionary.
I love that someone thought that you should make Pictionary for the NES, right? This game that you can play with a pencil and a paper. Yeah. It's like, this needs a digital adaptation that will not... how does it even function on the NES? I can't fathom as a designer how you would design that game and why you would want to pay like video game retail price to play Pictionary.
Well, this is like a grandma doesn't know what to get you for the NES type of game. This is like this is how you end up with Milo's Astro Lanes for Christmas morning on the N64.
So Tim Follin is saving Christmas for
some
kids whose grandma got them Pictionary.
Saved Christmas for the grandma, made Christmas markedly worse for the child receiving the gift.
Well, my grandma always put on Weather Report and Volpec and Jacko Pastorius whenever she played Pictionary back in the old days. That's what
Yeah, exactly. This is supposed to evoke childhood memories of having the ripping game of Pictionary.
That absolutely slapped.
I got one from the Super Nintendo, Plock. We all know Plock, the beloved game Plock for the Super Nintendo. Well, and if you don't, you should, but only because Tim Follin did the soundtrack, and I thought this track was the most interesting one of the lot. A truly
that panning.
crazy, I think. Hold on, let me. ...1993 Super Nintendo game. Yeah.
That is incredible.
Did anyone else use panning like this in the Super Nintendo? I've not think I can recall a single
Unless this
track.
was just added for a release after
Maybe,
the game
but-
came out, but not that I'm aware of. Just wait, it gets even zanier. I heard this, I was like, all right, nobody asked for this, but I'm throwing it in during the Tim Follin section.
Holy
Isn't that crazy?
smokes. If you like this song, go check out Lewis Cole, everybody.
Lewis Cole, you heard it here. This is, to me, when I think of Plock, this is the type of thing that I'm thinking of. Yeah.
This is like, I don't know, this is making me think of like, you know, a lounge in like some like utopian sci-fi setting, like the
Totally.
the lounge on a satellite.
It's like that really specific brand of like late 90s utopia
Yeah.
too, where it's like everything is chrome and there's like hope for the future. So good.
I love the, you know, work that composers like Tim Follin put into like emulating the articulation of an electric guitar with
Totally.
these samples. Like it's just its own. It becomes its own thing, but it just sounds so rad.
It's not even close to sounding like a real guitar, but yes, it's like it creates its own. There's a kind of a quality, a charming quality to it.
He's got a little. He's double tracked it and delayed it a second, so it sounds like a slap delay or whatever. Hey, there's so many techniques in here
Yeah.
that are just.
But yeah, like just emulating something that for a guitarist is just, you know, they're articulating as they play it. But Mr. Follin's got to go and like manually dial in all of these pitch bends, and like it's
We're not done yet.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got several fake guitars kind of coming up here. I
I
think.
feel like I've been missing out by not knowing who this guy is all these years.
Yeah, well, his soundtracks are sometimes I'll just listen to them for fun while like writing or something. They're worth a listen for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was introduced to his work pretty recently and was pretty quickly enraptured by it. But
the next song we have to talk about is one that I found the hardest to talk about. Real weird track. It is Fate Extra CCC BB Channel is the name of the track.
okay,
Do you
Catchy
remember
name.
the track? Yeah, right. CCBBGBGB track. Fate Extra CCC. It's a PSP game, making this the only PSP game on the list, I think. This is I think my first note for this track that I wrote was, I don't know what to say. But anyway, I'll just play it. You guys help me. The note I wrote was, I'm going to assume that this is a character theme for someone who's insane because I feel like I need to be put in a straitjacket after listening to this several times back to back.
I mean, this is, I guess, just a really interesting effect from two very disparate parts coming together, right? Like, remove the drums, and it's just a pretty standard kind of gothic sort of, you know, if you can try and mentally subtract that, you know, furious breakbeat from behind what's going on.
Yeah.
But, yeah, then you're adding...
Dark Circus is what came to mind
Yeah.
for me. Evil Circus.
Yeah.
Even this part here,
Totally.
right?
Yeah, and so there's there's definitely an incongruence between those two parts that are like adding up to something that's more than the sum of the parts.
Perhaps that is what's so kind of like why it's what's crazy about it to me. The
The
song.
whole is so much, or the sum of its parts is so much greater than each individual part. If you would break it all down, it would make more sense. But it sounds like total carnage and chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, chaos is what I thought.
There's a ton of passing tones in here, like, you know, like harmonically and chord-wise, it makes sense. But even within the bass, there's passing tones.
What is that? What does passing tones refer to?
It's just moving to a note that's not necessarily in the key, like the scale or of the key that you're playing or whatever. So it's just like an extra note.
If you think of like a walking bass line, right? The bass is hitting the roots of these chords, but there's a lot of these notes in between, and those aren't always part of the key.
Yeah, exactly. And the melody's doing it too. It's like it's adding extra notes that make it sound really weird. That's as best as I can put it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like ill-equipped to really get it. I tried to even look into Fate Extra, the game that this is from. I have never seen a series so hostile to people who haven't already immersed themselves in it before. I couldn't like suss out any information. I know people who are into like Fate is the name of the series. It's like comprised of like some video games and manga and anime and like lots of different series. As far as I can tell, the lore for this universe is it's like a Warhammer 40K style. Like, are you like ready for this? Like you really need to like invest yourself in this, and because of that investment, you have to like watch and play everything related to it that comes out, or else the investment is failed. Right? So,
what does this game look like?
It's like a fairly simple looking 3D game. I mean, the character designs and stuff are cool. It's very anime. It's very like there's a game series called Persona that it reminded me quite a bit of, just looking at gameplay. But even finding gameplay is kind of difficult. It's like a relatively obscure game and already not hugely mainstream, at least in the West series. And there's so many games in this series that like it's like trying to like find stuff. I don't know. It's really strange, but I mean, it looks cool. I just like was trying to figure out like what, like in what context is this playing? Is this like a battle theme? Is this like a character's theme? Because like usually I can tell just context clues of the song give it away, but in this case I was like, no, I can't really I can't really figure it out. But it's
be
an
like
interesting
the pause menu music or something.
That would be insane. Hey, you know what? Legend of Dragoon gets away with having like a cool kind of like lo-fi hip-hop background. This is only like a 1 degree of separation from that.
It's got like the Aphex Twin kind of drums going on.
Actually, yeah, it does.
Sometimes a little bit.
Yeah, it does kind of have the sort of like groovy insanity of some Aphex Twin, I
guess
think.
Depending on the album, but
Not Selected Ambient Works. Not that album, but
No.
But yeah, no, I can hear what you mean by that. Yeah, it's very non-traditional. But actually, I wanted to bring this in too. This is a little remix that was done of this song. Thought you guys might enjoy it.
Thanks. I hate it.
You guys don't like the Space Jam remix?
Quad City DJs mashups is officially the best music genre.
Who's responsible for this?
I will tell you who's responsible for it. There is a YouTuber named Silva Gunner who for the last like decade has been posting video game tracks on YouTube as though they are actually the video game tracks, and then you click on them and it's always some sick remix that he's done. So it's like you're expecting to hear Kokiri Forest, and then it just ends up being the Flintstones theme with like the Ocarina of Time sound font. And he's like tireless in this like ongoing effort to do this with the actual track for this song on YouTube doesn't have that many views, and he still decided to make a Space Jam remix for it.
Epic troll, bro.
Anyway, just wanted to include that. It felt necessary. Yeah, very odd track for a very obscure game that I'm still puzzled and figuring more about.
Did I ever share with you my brief foray into that kind of world of musical insanity?
Your
mashing
foray
up,
making it?
the DK rap with Beastie Boys.
No.
I gotta see.
I'd remember
Do
that.
tell.
I gotta see if I can find this.
Yeah, please.
I'll have to look for that and send it to you. It's on my computer at home for sure. Have you heard "In the Court of the Crimson Kong"?
Oh my god.
Always be funnier to me than somebody just generating a voice.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mixing the voices together like that.
art.
So ridiculous. All right, so this next track we got here is from not Secret of Mana, Trials of Mana. And the track's called Nuclear Fusion.
Oh, this one's fun.
It's a pretty odd name for a track considering. And here we go.
Oh yeah.
That bass line.
That's
Talk about
snare tone as
This
well.
this is a good example. This is Super Nintendo, not original Nintendo, but
Yeah.
that's absolutely like a sampled snare.
Yes.
So you can hear when it like the drum going like psh, like making that
Yeah.
punch noise. That's very obviously them sampling that instrument.
You're supposed to believe that somebody could play that bass line. Like I see Jaco Pastorius, a weather report in my head.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it was such a Super Nintendo JRPG trope to have like these driving drums and bass line with a flute on top carrying the melody. Like,
Yeah, totally, eh?
And this marimba sample is the best.
Yeah. It's a pretty awesome run here.
Why does marimba sample sound so much closer to an actual marimba than any other of the samples?
Good question.
Is it just that much closer timbre-wise?
You can't play it with any like. There's not a lot of articulation you can play it with, right? Like it's like percussion samples are always easiest, right? And it's percussion essentially.
Right.
Yeah, that's true, eh?
Yeah,
I don't know
there's-
why marimba in my head is. I don't register it as a percussive instrument, but I guess that's what it is.
It is.
If you're hitting something, is that a percussion instrument?
More or
So
less.
so a hammered dulcimer would be a percussion
tuned
instrument.
percussion.
Well, there's obviously line's a little blurry when you start hammering strings. It's a percussive way of playing a string instrument, but yeah, I guess. Yeah,
think-
you get
I think the category on Logic or something would be tuned percussion
Okay.
or melodic percussion.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I have covered fairly extensively, actually, the composer of this particular track. His name is Hiroki Kikuta. He got his start working for Square. He did, I think he did sound effects to begin with. And they moved him, there's a game called Secret of Mana, and he did, and I've absolutely sent Will Secret of Mana tracks before. I found them really cool because there is so many dense, warm layers to his Super Nintendo music a lot of the time. And this is maybe a little bit different because this is a more action-packed kind of track. no less impressive still for the console. But yeah, he was very, very talented in getting a good sound out of the Super Nintendo, and he went on to create his own game, which he also composed music for, called Kudelka for PS1, and that's where I talked about him because I covered that game.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he that game in particular, he's pretty just weird offbeat tracks. This is far more traditionally RPG centric music.
Like, there's a very weird offbeat part in the like turn around into the repeat though. Like,
oh yeah,
yeah. Like that is a wacky chord progression.
True, eh?
So it's you're in, what are we in? Oh, that's my white noise there. That's not going to give me a lot of
We're in Z
information that I want. Yeah, we're in D minor. So it's B major, C major, this 6, 7 walk up back to expecting D minor, but we resolve to the major, which is not what you're expecting, but it's a, you know, it's used. It's called the Picardy third.
Picardy third.
Yeah. So when you're expecting when your key is minor or modal, and you kind of have your ending resolution on a major, that's just the type of cadence.
Picardy a composer?
You know what? I don't know. I'm trotting out trivia to sound smart, Will, and now you're making me sound stupid.
I've heard the term. I just can't remember where it comes from.
Yes, he was a composer. He was known for wearing bright red hats. So we get that, which is unexpected, but within the rules. And then he just keeps going up with like more major chords. So just
moving up in whole steps.
Yeah, major chords moving up in whole steps, which is just not following. You're smarter than I am, so maybe there's something there.
I want to hear it again.
Also weird. I feel like the chords in the background are kind of almost at war with the like more with like the flute in the foreground. At times, like there's sort of a dissonance specifically right here. There, that note right there, that, to me, just doesn't sound the way that your brain would expect it to sound. Even here too.
Yeah,
it's not a counter
melody
exactly.
Is outside of those triad chords, but
and the chords are playing very melodically, like they're almost following their own counter melody to the flute. Like it's not just background chords.
Yeah,
that's true. Background probably isn't the right word.
I'd have to look at those chords closer. I should have, but they sound like inversion because the bass is playing. It sounds to me like the second.
Yeah. Here's our wacky transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's breaking some rules there.
Yeah. That is interesting.
As far as I can tell, he's doing whatever he feels like, and good for him. It sounds good.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt. Listening to the tracks in Kudelka specifically, that to me was like, okay, like I don't need any more. This guy doesn't need to prove himself to me, because like the tracks in that game are truly, truly bizarre, to the point where I'll bring one up right now, even though it's not on the list, just as a tangential thing here. I'm certain that Will probably have heard this. This is a JRPG. This is the battle theme. You hear this theme every 10 seconds till the end of the game.
I have indeed heard this.
No doubt. I am sure I've sent it to you and said, listen to this. This is a PS1 game, mind you, so obviously a little higher fidelity. Sort of.
Kind of some ethnic instruments, ethnic feeling instruments. Anyway.
Definitely.
A sad melody, but with
Yeah.
marching percussion.
Yeah, this is like the
Some sort.
slowest, most melancholic JRPG battle theme I've
Right,
ever heard by a
exactly. Yeah,
considerable margin. Like,
I think I've mentioned something to that tune in the video as well. I'm like, this is really like sad and nostalgic and melancholic.
It's got like Twin Peaks strings going on in here. Gotta throw in that pan flute or
Totally.
whatever.
And Kikuta loves the pan flute. And all of his works from Secret to Trials of Mana to Kudelka, you're going to hear the pan flute over and over again. He relies on it really to carry a lot of like the melodies in his music. And it sounds a lot better, I think, on the PS1. Just
For sure,
sounds
yeah.
Great.
the added kind of fidelity helps.
I really like the track,
Yeah.
even though it would seem out of place in a battle setting, but it must work.
Sure. Yeah, I think Kudelka is a very underrated game. Very cool horror kind of JRPG. Lots of really amazing voice acting, and there's even motion capture in it, which is highly irregular for a PS1 game to have like physical actors on a soundstage acting the game out. You don't really see that a lot in PS1 games. Even Metal Gear Solid, like everything was animated by hand, right? So, but it was a pretty late PS1 game, but it was totally underrated, undersold. Ended up Kikuta, who composed the music we just listened to, it seemed almost out of like a frustration. He left the game industry really early. I think he just came back to score another game after however many years. Another entry in this Mana series came out.
Wonder what he was doing in the meantime.
Yeah, I don't know. He had his like fingers in all kinds of pies. He knew he had like
Literally, he became a pie
he
maker.
became a pie thief. Every man's dream.
pan flute playing pie theme.
So I think, in the interest of not keeping everybody here all day, the next song we'll listen to is going to be, the next and final, I should say, is going to be Earthbound, Pokey Means Business. End with a fun one. Yeah.
This one's for Dave to analyze, not me.
Just you wait. You might have more to say about it than you think. Forgot how unbearable the lead up is.
Unbearable. This is amazing.
I mean,
This is
unbearable
great.
as in I'm waiting. I'm anxious for it. Not as in it's bad.
Pokey means business, but it'll be with you in 1 minute.
Yeah, true. But yeah, very traditional, old, classic video game track, and
It's a
then
jarring transition.
jarring is right. Intentionally jarring. Yeah, this is like a pretty Metallica sounding
I
track.
love that guitar, synth guitar.
Totally. As a matter of fact, I had written down in my notes specifically that this whole track sounds to me like a synthetic version of a song specifically from And Justice for All, due to the
Totally.
progginess of it and how many times it changes tempo.
That's interesting.
Oh, and this is the best. Yeah, that double kick. That's so great. That's a back when Lars Ulrich could double kick style double kick. That's a battery double kick right there.
Totally. Rest in peace, Lars.
I'm still here. And then the slow part, which to me again, first thing I think of is not And Justice for All, but like Master of Puppets. In so many of those Metallica songs, there is that part where they like slow it down before kicking it back up
It's
again.
thrash metal with that prog compositional element, right?
Totally. Where the song's in like sections. Yeah. Which makes it appropriate as a intense boss battle song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking like that type of like fake out, and that's like a very intentional fake out in the beginning. The way it like lures you into thinking it's like a stereotypical video game track before hitting you with the guitars.
Yeah.
That probably isn't something that you would really have seen in a game at that point in time with Earthbound.
Oh.
Maybe to an extent, but
yeah, you're probably right.
I love the pitch bending so
good.
much. It's so like eerie sounding.
Yeah.
It's like it's not exactly how an electric guitar behaves or should behave.
That almost kind of
Unless
makes
you-
it more dissonant in a way.
Yeah.
It's almost more of like an uncanniness to the sound of it, you know?
Yeah.
Which is good because this song is supposed to kind of like, and that's a weird.
I love the fun part. It's like weirdly. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of the kind of the song's based kind of really heavily around tritones, which are very dissonant sounding and have this association with bad things, evil things. So back in the day, it was referred,
The devil's
triad there.
Right.
So it's based around that.
Here, let me
diminished
pause it.
fifth,
You want to
augmented
play that
fourth.
again there?
So this is a tritone. It's you're taking either a fifth, then diminishing it, dropping it one.
Is this the one that
semitone.
was supposedly like banned by the church or something to play?
Yeah, so the chord there. Banned by the church,
Evil.
associated with kind of mustache twirling villains.
Right. Totally. Makes me want to tie a woman to a train track.
Yeah, you know it. So yeah, a lot of the harmonies like several things.
Good question. Not much.
Ignore that.
No.
Yeah.
Carry
So
on.
a lot of the is very like prominent in the song, and then you get to that like kind of funny bass line that's all of a sudden way more da 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 da, and it's like
She's My Cherry Pie or something.
yeah, it's way more
An evil
like,
version.
grounded in a key, but at this point all you've been listening to is these like dissonant tritone harmonies that it feels out of place, even though it's like the most normal thing in the song.
Can I try my hand at that?
Oh please.
Man, that's sassier than I remember the song being.
Pokey
I
means
don't
a
know.
different sort of business now.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go back to that part. Maybe I'm just hearing,
Here-
Motley Crue on everything.
It's like a 3-minute track. I'll play it from close to the beginning again here, and you can.
And this opening is very, like completely different genre, very sort of
Castlevania.
romantic. Yeah, very Castlevania.
Yeah.
Very romantic era.
What's happening there, Dave, with that descending chromaticism? That's like blowing my mind because I can't figure it out.
It's
That is so interesting to me.
yeah. Can you pause it?
Yeah.
Can you play that?
Yeah, that's so like Dracula Arrives type of music.
Yeah, he's messing around there quite a lot. That's cool. I'd have to look closer at that, but I just love that chromatic run like works melodically in a weird way with that chord structure.
Yeah, like
But double kick also, I feel like I don't hear a lot of double kicking in NES games or SNES games.
There should be
There should be
more
more.
double kicking.
not outside of rock and roll racing, but
Okay, fair enough. Forgot all about that, as did most. Yeah, this is like authentically metal inspired. It doesn't feel like a hacky
Yeah.
approach to doing an SNES metal song. It feels like it's a love letter to actual metal, you know?
yeah. Yeah, those pitch
That's
bends.
that's so crazy. I love that.
And that little slap delay just makes it sound even weirder.
Totally. It's supposed to be like reverb. Oh no, Pokey, no. And
So I was curious. I don't know if I'm going to be able to replicate this. I'm just wasting a lot of time in this section here, which I hope you edit out. But
no, keeping it all in.
can you find just Pokey's regular theme?
Yeah.
Because I have a suspicion.
Pokey.
I was looking at this just before we started recording, and a suspicion that these two are probably like related in some way.
This is a really cool soundtrack. Whoa.
That is a crunchy bass.
Yeah, it's almost fart bass.
I thought they're... Yeah, you'll probably have to cut this. I thought there was something some connection
Picked
I
out
made, but
as
I'm not
related.
finding it now.
There could be a secret lay motif in there somewhere.
Yeah.
An electronic tom sound.
I love it. Yeah, it's so corny.
I want to dance with somebody.
Oh, yeah. There is definitely
Yeah,
something
that-
there. Yeah.
Yeah, play Pokey Means Business now.
The first kind of guitar section.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, this... Like, go to the guitar, the metal section.
Yeah.
Yeah, this,
I wouldn't have picked that out in a million years, honestly.
Yeah, they're related. They're at least cousins, right? Like,
Yeah, that's interesting. It's the same theme of...
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Up and down and up a little and down and up and down.
Yeah, so this is... I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into this, but it seems appropriate that, like, I haven't played Earthbound, but I'm assuming Pokey Means Business comes at this reveal of Pokey's true character or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
and that he's-
Earthbound spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Can I spoil the Earthbound for you, or you want to keep it a secret?
you spoil away.
All right, Earthbound
Shame on
spoiler
me for
alert.
not
Yeah,
playing
this
it yet.
this song plays Pokey, who's sort of just like, I think, like kind of a bully character who's just kind of an ass most of the game.
Yeah.
He's revealed at the end to be like this biomech spider thing that fights you before the main boss. Like he's
Right.
like his body's like repurposed and
Yeah.
stuff.
I could have predicted that, never
Easy.
having played the game.
Well, you remember Super Smash Bros. On N64? You remember Ness?
Mm-hmm.
How he was like the hardest character to unlock. Ness is the main or a main character from Earthbound.
Right.
Mhm.
So that's I remember when we were younger and before a lot of us had any exposure to RPGs. I remember nobody knew who Ness was or
Yeah.
what he was from. They just knew he was like the hardest character to unlock.
Yeah.
That is so true.
So
And now Earthbound is like, yeah, man, big Earthbound fan, excited to play it for first time. Just everybody cites Earthbound as like a big thing. It's kind of like Twin Peaks, you know. Sometimes hindsight delivers unto a game the justice it deserves. Although I don't think Earthbound was like a failure or anything when it came out. I just don't think it, like the Mother series in the West, which is what Earthbound is a part of, just didn't really have any, didn't have the chutzpah that they had in Japan. So. Yeah.
But I was gonna say, like, you get this like fun opportunity as a composer to like relate these two themes of, you know, Pokey's normal theme and his revealed, you know, who he actually is, who he turns into or whatever, right? Like, and it's not in discontinuity with what you were hearing earlier, but it's so different as to be almost unrecognizable. And,
Yes.
Like you.
Oh yeah.
it's,
True, eh? could definitely be something there.
Yeah.
And even if there's not, who cares?
Exactly.
I don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is like a disfigured version of that theme. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've been at this point. It'll be edited down and everything, but we've been here for like. I've got like 3 hours and 15 minutes on this thing, so we've been at it for a while. So, I think we'll call it there, and I hope you guys will join me again to finish off this list at some point because I thought it was super fun. I really enjoyed getting you guys' perspectives on this stuff.
Pleasure was mine,
Yeah,
boys.
this was a blast.
Awesome. Okay,
Next
well,
time we'll prepare a duet, Dave. All in the whole tone scale.
don't do it. Don't play chopsticks.
Should we play it out? Should we play the podcast out?
Play us out.
I feel like nobody will come back.
I in one of my bands, in a very inappropriate way, I'm like, I got to figure out how to work a whole tone scale into one of my solos for no reason. And so completely inappropriately over an E major, I'm just like, I'm going for it. And I start the solo like this. The progression
Wow.
was like grease.
That is.
When I did my music degree, there was I don't say this to toot my own horn. I got the best grades in theory classes, but that's just because I like puzzles, and music theory you can boil down to being a puzzle, and I like solving puzzles. That just fit my brain really well. It came very naturally to me. I don't think that's any grand achievement on my part. It's just the way I'm built. But there was a guy in my class. I got better grades then, but he was way smarter than me at music theory. But I got better grades with him because he would constantly, every assignment, he'd receive the assignment, look at it, and go like, I'm going to see if I can make like 75% of the chords in this diminished and still follow the rules. Or like he would just impose these restrictions on himself, do the sort of, like I'm going to write, only a whole tone melody or that sort of thing. And
Just for the the personal challenge.
yeah,
of it.
just in the glee in his face when he told you he was going to do this was
Probably makes you a more versatile musician to be able to do that. Eh?
yeah.
That's interesting.
And like break the rules, and like see if you can allow certain rules to be broken and to what degree they actually
he wouldn't try to
work.
break rules. He would just try to like push them to these like really weird extremes, completely unprovoked.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
If your song didn't get listened to, have no fear. It will be listened to maybe not very soon. I probably shouldn't have said the word very. It will be listened to as soon as possible, as soon as 3 adults with responsibilities can conceivably get together again.
It will be listened to very in an amount of time.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. Guys, thank you for joining me, and till next time.